The city rose every year like a child that refused to stop growing. Glass towers stretched their necks toward the sky, shining in the sun as if they carried no memory of the ground beneath them. But below those towers, old streets still breathed slowly. Cracked roads remembered footsteps. Rusted gates guarded family compounds where laughter once lived louder than money. Here, progress walked fast, but it did not wait for everyone. Some people moved forward with it. Others stood in its shadow, watching their dreams shrink as the buildings grew. In the early mornings, the market woke before the sun. Women spread cloth on wooden tables, calling out prices with voices trained by years of patience. Men argued softly over baskets of tomatoes and bunches of greens. Nearby, elders sat beneath old trees, their words slow but heavy, measuring right and wrong the way their fathers once had. At places of worship, prayers rose like smoke, asking for mercy, success, and protection. In this city, nothing truly happened in secret. Eyes followed footsteps. Stories moved faster than truth. A family's honor was weighed daily, not by what they said, but by what people whispered. The child who would later be forgotten was raised in that watching world. From a young age, they were taught to greet elders with lowered eyes and a steady voice. Their parents said, "The tongue can cut deeper than a knife. Learn when to hold it." They learned that patience was strength and silence was respect. When wronged, they were taught to endure, not to shout. Dignity, their mother said, was something no thief could steal unless you gave it away. These lessons settled deep, shaping a heart that would later carry more than it should. Those parents lived simply. Their clothes were clean but worn. Their hands were rough from honest work. They never owned land that made others bow, nor money that made doors open quickly. Yet people trusted them. When they spoke straight. When they promised, they delivered. In a world that admired loud success, they carried quiet integrity. Their child watched them closely, learning that wealth could buy comfort, but character fed the soul. Still, honesty without power left them exposed, like a roof with missing tiles. The uncle was different. His name alone could clear paths. Guards smiled when they saw him. Traders stood taller. Elders listened closely when he spoke. He lived in a house people pointed at with respect. Children whispered his name as a symbol of what success looked like. He gave generously in public and spoke wisely in gatherings. To the community, he was proof that the city rewarded hard work. To the child, he was both shelter and shadow, someone admired too much to be questioned easily. When loss came, it did not arrive with noise. It came quietly, like nightfall. One day, the parents were there. The next, they were not. Death or downfall, either way, the house lost its warmth. The child felt unanchored, like a canoe cut loose from its rope. Grief blurred days into nights. Familiar faces offered condolences, then returned to their lives. Protection faded. Vulnerability stepped in. The family line weakened where it once stood firm. It was then the uncle stepped forward. In front of elders, under open sky, he placed his words carefully. "This child is mine to guide," he said. "I will not let them fall." Murmurs of approval followed. Heads nodded. An elder lifted his staff and spoke blessings. In that moment, trust was sealed not just between uncle and child, but before ancestors and God. In African ways, such words were not air. They were bonds. The child believed him. The community believed him. And with belief came hope, hope that the shadow would lift and the road ahead would open again. The day the car arrived, the sun seemed to pause in the sky. It stood there, polished and proud, reflecting faces filled with wonder. To the child who had known only waiting and borrowing, it felt like tomorrow had arrived early. The uncle held out the keys with a calm smile. "This is yours now," he said. "Stand on your own feet." Those words were heavier than metal. The engine's hum sounded like freedom. Neighbors gathered, nodding with approval. An elder murmured, "A river that is trusted with water must learn where to flow." The car was not just transport, it was trust, adulthood, and a promise wrapped in steel. For the first time since loss, the child felt seen, no longer leaning, but rising. But blessings are loud, and envy has sharp ears. Soon, smiles thinned. Greetings became brief. A cousin laughed too quickly and asked too many questions. An ant praised the car while measuring it with her eyes. At meals, silence stretched where warmth once lived. Whispers walked behind doors. No one accused, yet unease settled like dust after a passing truck. The child felt it in the air, the way hands paused mid-gesture, the way eyes turned away. In African tales, trouble does not shout first, it hums softly, waiting to be heard. Then came the morning without the car. The space where it slept was empty. The gate stood open, confused. The child searched the street, the corners, the faces. "Did you see it?" Heads shook. Voices softened. No answers stayed. The uncle was away. The elders were busy. Each question returned heavier than it left. The child stood still, heart racing, knowing something had broken. But the tongue remembered its lessons. Silence was chosen, not because it was right, but because it was safer. Trust cracked quietly, like clay drying too fast. Shame followed like a shadow. The compound felt smaller, colder. Whispers grew teeth. "Ungrateful," someone muttered. "Careless," said another. The child felt the weight of a curse that had not been spoken but was already believed. Accusation would bring war. Silence promised survival. So the child stepped back, then away. Gates closed without a sound. Belongings slipped through fingers. In that world, respect was a law, and breaking it carried a price few could pay. Now, time opens on a different picture. Behind a dumpster, where broken chairs and torn boxes gather, the child sits upright. Clothes are worn, but the spine is straight. People pass by, eyes trained forward. The city throws away what it no longer wants, and truth sometimes hides there too. The smell is harsh, but dignity remains. The car is gone, the promise is buried. Yet something breathes beneath the weight of neglect. In the quiet, the child listens, to memory, to fate. Elders say truth has seasons like rain. It does not rush dry ground. It waits. Pain tightens the chest, but hope refuses to die. The heart whispers, "Hold on." What was stolen will be named. What was buried will rise. And when the time comes, the earth itself will remember. Night fell gently on the city, but it did not soften its heart. While lights glittered in distant buildings, the cold crept closer to the ground. Hunger spoke in the stomach like a drum beaten too long. Rain sometimes arrived without warning, soaking clothes and thoughts alike. The body learned to curl, to listen, to wait. Survival became a quiet form of resistance, breathing slowly, standing again after sleep broke apart. In the darkness, the city slept, but one soul stayed awake, counting hours the way farmers count seeds, believing morning must come if night had arrived. When the sun rose, familiar faces moved past like shadows that refused to remember their own shape. People who once greeted warmly now looked through, not at. A neighbor paused, then turned away. A former friend crossed the road. It was not hunger that hurt most, but the way a name faded from mouths. In that place, poverty did not erase a person, shame did. Silence wrapped itself around the body like a second skin. To be unseen was a kind of death that made no sound. Behind the dumpster, broken things gathered, chairs with missing legs, boxes torn by weather, scraps no one claimed. It felt like a throne built from what the city had rejected. Sitting there, upright and still, dignity refused to bend. Elders used to say, "What is thrown away today may judge us tomorrow." The place carried a lesson. Society decides worth quickly, but fate takes its time. Among the discarded, truth rested, patient and heavy. Memory returned often, uninvited. There was a time when keys jingled and heads turned. When the car arrived, respect followed it like a shadow. Greetings were loud then. Doors opened easily. People said, "You are doing well," as if success had always waited. With the car came a different way of being seen, standing taller, speaking freely. Now, the same streets offered only passing glances. The contrast cut deep, honor given by objects, withdrawn just as fast. In the quiet, questions whispered. The car had not simply vanished like mist. Signs remained, too many knowing looks, too much calm. The heart began to connect small things, a delayed answer, a changed tone, a door closed too softly. Truth did not shout. It tapped gently, waiting for courage to answer. The mind listened while the mouth stayed closed, holding respect like a shield. A cousin's smile returned to memory, wide, quick, uneasy. Jokes that landed wrong. Questions asked with interest too sharp to be kind. In families, rivalry often wears laughter to hide its teeth. No accusation formed, only a feeling that something precious had been measured and desired. Competition lived quietly, fed by comparison and pride. Then there was the aunt, voice sweet as ripe fruit. She spoke of care, of family unity, of protecting her children from hardship. Her hands moved often, rearranging things that were not hers. In her eyes lived fear, the fear that another's rise would dim her own. Love and theft shared the same face. Elders warned, when protection forgets justice, it becomes hunger wearing kindness. The night returned again. Hunger spoke. Memory listened. And beneath the weight of silence, the heart waited, knowing that in African ways, truth walks slowly, but it always arrives. There was a time when questions could have been asked and answers might still have mattered. But the uncle chose quiet. He heard small reports, saw small signs, yet he folded them into silence. In gatherings, he smiled and spoke of unity. In private, he avoided the path of truth. Leadership, the elders used to say, is not proven by the loudness of commands but by the courage to stand alone. Still, he chose peace over justice, believing calm was the same as fairness. His authority did not strike or shout, but it allowed harm to grow by doing nothing. In that stillness, injustice found shelter. The car did not disappear into thin air. It moved, quietly, like a calabash passed behind a hut. One day it rested in a different yard. Another day it wore a new driver's pride. Papers changed hands, stories changed shape, but the name of the car remained the same. People spoke of it casually, as if nothing had shifted. Yet an entire future had been redirected. Opportunity, once promised, was reassigned without ceremony. Betrayal, it became clear, was not an accident. It was planned with soft voices and clean hands. From childhood, silence had been taught as wisdom. Do not point at elders, the mother once warned. Words can wake sleeping spirits. Accusing family was said to bring curses, rejection, and long shadows. So silence settled deep, becoming heavier with each passing day. It was no longer just a choice, it was an inheritance. The mouth learned restraint while the heart carried the weight. Punishment came not from blows, but from the slow bending of the spirit. Many words rose to the tongue and died there. Each time truth pushed forward, family honor pulled it back. The name of the family felt like a pot balanced on the head. One wrong step and it would shatter. Endurance became the safer road. Tradition, once a shield, tightened into a cage. Respect protected the elders, but trapped the young. Still, the lesson held, survive today, even if tomorrow must wait. From a distance, the uncle's life climbed higher. New projects opened. New clothes appeared. At gatherings, he gave gifts with open hands. People praised him loudly. A man of wisdom, they said. A pillar, others added. Yet behind those generous gestures lived neglect. Needs went unanswered. Silence filled the space where guidance should have stood. Each cheer from the crowd deepened the wound, because praise without justice rings hollow to the forgotten. He was called wise by those who never asked questions. Reputation wrapped around him like a fine robe, hiding the stains beneath. In that community, power was often mistaken for truth. People bowed to success and turned away from doubt. And so the balance tipped. The strong were believed, the quiet were ignored, and truth waited, patient, wounded, but alive, knowing that even the longest night must one day face the morning. Anger lived inside like a restless drum, beating against lessons learned at the knee of elders. Respect stood guard at the door of the heart, holding a staff carved with old rules. Each time rage rose, respect whispered, "Do not lift your voice against blood." Each time respect spoke, anger replied, "Silence is feeding the wrong mouths." The body stayed calm, the face stayed low, but inside, a quiet war burned. No rebellion showed on the skin, yet the soul wrestled day and night. In the ways of the people, self-control was praised more than truth spoken too early. Still, the cost of that control pressed hard. Pride sat upright even when hunger bent the back. The stomach argued loudly, but dignity refused to beg. There were moments when a single word could have opened a door, but the mouth stayed closed. "If I beg," the heart said, "I lose myself." Hunger did not leave because pride stayed. Each day became a test. Each night became a lesson. Suffering, endured with dignity, became its own form of resistance. But resistance is expensive, and the price was paid slowly, with aching bones and long walks under the sun. Questions were asked to the wind, to the dust, to the stars that watched without blinking. If silence is wisdom, the heart wondered, why does it hurt like a lie? No one answered. Yet belief remained that ancestors listen even when people do not. Fate, the elders said, walks slowly but never forgets the path. Justice may sleep, but it does not die. These thoughts did not bring food or shelter, but they gave shape to endurance. Meaning became a thin blanket against the cold. Sleep brought dreams that felt like old warnings returning. Faces from childhood appeared, not angry, not kind, only watching. Roads split and rejoined. A voice, not loud, not soft, repeated the same feeling, "What is buried still breathes." There was no fire, no spirits dancing, only memory knocking again and again. The dreams did not shout truth, but they refused to let it rest. Morning always came with the same weight, heavier than before. In corners of the community, elders began to talk. Their voices carried stories like proverbs. "Some children are forgotten," one would say, stirring tea slowly. "And forgotten debts grow teeth." Another would nod. "The earth remembers what people try to hide." These were not accusations, only reminders wrapped in wisdom. Rumors moved like smoke, thin, but everywhere. It felt as though fate had started clearing its throat. There were moments when paths almost crossed. A familiar laugh passed by a doorway. A known voice sounded just around the corner. Once, footsteps stopped on the same street, close enough to feel breath, far enough to avoid sight. Each near meeting tightened the chest. It felt planned, as if destiny was knocking softly, testing whether the door would open on its own. The ground itself seemed to prepare. Old tensions surfaced. Small truths slipped out. People paused longer when speaking names. In the old belief, truth does not arrive by force. It comes when the earth agrees to carry it. And now, everything felt ready, like soil waiting for rain, like a drum waiting for the first strike. The night grew quiet, not with peace, but with expectation. Something was coming. The land knew it. The ancestors knew it. And soon, the living would have no choice but to listen. The street was quiet, save for the distant hum of evening traffic. Footsteps approached, deliberate, familiar, yet carrying the weight of authority. The uncle walked slowly, as if led not by choice but by the hands of something older than the city itself. His eyes, sharp and steady, fell upon the alley where shadows gathered. Something in the air shifted, an ancestral whisper, a quiet summons. Destiny had guided him here, to the edge of what he had long ignored. He stopped. The garbage bins, torn boxes, and discarded chairs told stories of lives abandoned. And there, sitting upright, dignity intact despite everything, was the one he had promised to protect. Wealth and power had always cast a shadow over this place, but now they faced what they had overlooked. Silence pressed heavily between them. No words yet, only the sharp awareness that the balance had shifted. Then the eyes met. Not the eyes of recognition shaped by memory, but eyes that remembered blood. Posture, stance, and the faint lift of a chin spoke louder than any introduction could. The mind blinked. Shock replaced certainty. He knew, even before the mind could form the question. The world seemed to pause. The city continued elsewhere, but here, time slowed. Rain dripping from a rusted pipe, a stray dog's distant bark, all faded under the weight of what was about to unfold. Hearts beat slowly, every second stretching longer than the last. Finally, his voice broke the silence. Not anger, not blame, only confusion. "Where's the car I bought you?" The words hung like thunder in the empty space, simple, soft, yet heavy enough to awaken years of buried pain. Every promise, every betrayal, every silence condensed into that single question. The question fell into the chest of the one who had suffered quietly. Pain, shock, restraint, they collided, folding years into this single instant. The world seemed to hold its breath as the answer hovered, unspoken, waiting for courage to speak. And in that moment, a revelation settled like dust. The elder never truly knew, or perhaps had chosen not to know. Innocence or denial, intention or oversight, it no longer mattered. The layers of understanding shifted. Blame became complicated, guilt nuanced. The heart, though battered, recognized the truth. What had been hidden was not invisible, but selectively ignored. Silence had been chosen, not only by circumstance, but by the one whose authority had shaped so much. The air between them held weight, thick as the mud after a rainy day. Respect stood like a wall inside the protagonist, holding back the storm that had raged for years. The body ached to speak, to demand, to shake the foundations that had caused such suffering. But the elder's teachings whispered, "Do not raise your voice against blood, even when the blood has spilled." Every instinct to accuse fought against the force of tradition. Silence felt heavier than hunger, but to break it recklessly would dishonor more than oneself. It could fracture the moral code the family and community depended on. Finally, the truth began to speak, not as a shout, not as an accusation, but with calm dignity that carried the weight of patience and endurance. The words moved slowly, deliberately, each syllable chosen to honor the past and still unmask the wrong. "The car, it did not vanish," the voice said quietly. "It was taken, guided by hands that feared nothing but a child's claim to what was theirs." Rage waited behind the words, but dignity led. The heart knew the difference between justice and revenge. The story unfolded, carefully naming what had been lost and how. "It was sold, reassigned, moved quietly to strengthen another," the voice continued, tracing the path of human greed that had interrupted destiny. Actions were laid bare, but fingers were not pointed. The pain of betrayal spoke for itself, louder than any accusation could. Each sentence traced the disruption, a map of promises stolen, opportunities misdirected, and trust broken. And then came the unveiling of silence's beneficiaries. Those who smiled too quickly, who watched and said nothing, "They are part of the story," the voice whispered. And those who stayed silent, even as the world shifted, they carried the burden of doing nothing. The community learned who profited, who hid, and how absence of action had become a crime in its own right. Justice, once private, now took its first breaths. Respect, once a shield, had been wielded as a rope. "We were taught to bow, to honor, to fear words spoken to elders," the voice said. And in that fear, power became a chain around the powerless. Tradition, meant to teach harmony, was twisted to control. The moral struck sharp, piercing the armor of authority and leaving clarity where confusion had lived. Finally, the story could not remain small. Neighbors paused in the streets, ears straining. Voices that had whispered now joined the current. The weight of the revelation spread beyond one pair of eyes and two hearts. Truth, once confined, now demanded attention. The community stirred. Judgment, once latent, began to awaken. And in that awakening, the long-buried promise of justice edged closer, as inevitable as the rising sun. The sun rose high, unforgiving, spilling light over the city that had once turned its eyes away. Now, the weight of what had been hidden pressed down. The family name, once praised in markets and gatherings, trembled under the heat of public scrutiny. Whispers traveled faster than the wind, brushing across compounds and streets alike. Shame moved like smoke, reaching even those who thought themselves untouched, and the reputation built over decades quivered as every secret dared to step into the sun. The dumpster, long overlooked, became a shrine of buried truths. Discarded boxes and tattered cloths held more than waste. They held lies, promises broken, and the silent suffering of one who had been cast aside. Here, where the world had thrown away what it did not wish to see, justice began to speak in its own quiet, relentless way. Each object told a story, each stain whispered betrayal, and the place of refuse transformed into a stage of moral reckoning. The uncle's face grew heavy, shadowed by more than sunlight. The life he had built, wealth, authority, admiration, was forced to confront the one he had quietly destroyed. His silence, chosen for peace, now appeared as complicity. Every step he had taken, every choice he had made, met the truth with an unblinking stare. He felt the imbalance, the moral weight pressing against the pride that had carried him so far. Around them, the earth seemed to lean closer, as though ready to receive the judgment it had long held in patience. The ground beneath the compound, beneath the streets, beneath the eyes of the people, waited. Justice no longer lingered in shadows. It had arrived, inevitable and resolute. Every heartbeat carried the sense that what was hidden could not hide forever, and the moment of reckoning was complete. Then silence broke. Not with fury, not with despair, but like dry earth after rain, opening fissures for renewal. Words long held in the heart spilled gently, cleansed by patience and suffering. The air seemed lighter, though charged with the weight of truth now acknowledged. Renewal whispered through the compound, through the crowd, through the family that had learned the cost of concealment. The uncle finally looked inward, tracing the footprints he had left behind. Wealth without justice, authority without conscience, respect without accountability, they all came into sharp relief. "I thought peace was the path," he murmured, voice heavy with realization. "I see now that peace without truth is only silence dressed as virtue." He understood that the measure of a man is not counted in riches or titles, but in the courage to face what he has enabled, and the willingness to set it right. The realization came slowly, like sunlight creeping through a thick forest canopy. Peace, long assumed to be the highest good, revealed its hidden cost. Silence, once worn like armor, had allowed harm to grow unnoticed. Each unspoken word, each avoided confrontation, had left a wound in the family, in the community, and in the soul of the one who suffered. "I see now," the voice whispered, heavy with understanding, "that peace bought with injustice is still violence. It does not heal, it hides the fracture, only to let it grow deeper." The truth settled, raw and unmovable, like stones in a riverbed. Under the open sky, the family and neighbors gathered. Faces once distant, some curious, some fearful, leaned in as stories long buried found their way into the wind. Words were spoken aloud, not with anger, but with clarity and precision. The community became a living court, listening with the weight of tradition behind every ear. Questions were asked, not to shame, but to witness. "Who knew?" one elder murmured. "Who chose to stay silent?" The guilty could no longer hide behind excuses or half-truths. Some raised their heads in stubborn denial, but the gaze of the crowd made their pride tremble. Others could not bear it. Shame pressed down until it crushed the confidence they had so carefully built. The air carried the moral reckoning itself, and justice unfolded quietly, without cruelty, yet with the authority of truth. The elders spoke next, their voices steady and measured. They did not point to destroy, but to restore balance where it had been broken. "We are bound by blood and by the stories we leave for the children," one elder said. "This is not revenge, but a mending of the line. You have done wrong, yet the path of restoration is open if you walk it with honesty." Their words weighed like gold, teaching, guiding, and reshaping the family's moral compass. Shelter was offered, support extended, and acknowledgment given in public. The gifts were more than material, they were recognition of dignity long denied. The community witnessed, and in that witnessing, the lost honor began to return. "We cannot erase the pain," another elder said, "but we can honor what was wronged, so that the heart may heal." Still, the protagonist's pride held firm. The offered compensation, though generous, was not the reward sought. "I do not need gifts to claim my worth," the voice declared. "Dignity cannot be bought. Respect must be earned, truth must be spoken, and growth must be chosen over greed." In that choice, a deeper victory emerged, one of self-respect, moral clarity, and a promise that the cycle of silence and betrayal would no longer claim dominion over life. The realization came slowly, like sunlight creeping through a thick forest canopy. Peace, long assumed to be the highest good, revealed its hidden cost. Silence, once worn like armor, had allowed harm to grow unnoticed. Each unspoken word, each avoided confrontation, had left a wound in the family, in the community, and in the soul of the one who suffered. "I see now," the voice whispered, heavy with understanding, "that peace bought with injustice is still violence. It does not heal, it hides the fracture, only to let it grow deeper." The truth settled, raw and unmovable, like stones in a riverbed. Under the open sky, the family and neighbors gathered. Faces once distant, some curious, some fearful, leaned in as stories long buried found their way into the wind. Words were spoken aloud, not with anger, but with clarity and precision. The community became a living court, listening with the weight of tradition behind every ear. Questions were asked, not to shame, but to witness. "Who knew?" one elder murmured. "Who chose to stay silent?" The guilty could no longer hide behind excuses or half-truths. Some raised their heads in stubborn denial, but the gaze of the crowd made their pride tremble. Others could not bear it. Shame pressed down until it crushed the confidence they had so carefully built. The air carried the moral reckoning itself, and justice unfolded quietly, without cruelty, yet with the authority of truth. The elders spoke next, their voices steady and measured. They did not point to destroy, but to restore balance where it had been broken. "We are bound by blood and by the stories we leave for the children," one elder said. "This is not revenge, but a mending of the line. You have done wrong, yet the path of restoration is open if you walk it with honesty." Their words weighed like gold, teaching, guiding, and reshaping the family's moral compass. Shelter was offered, support extended, and acknowledgement given in public. The gifts were more than material. They were recognition of dignity long denied. The community witnessed, and in that witnessing, the lost honor began to return. "We cannot erase the pain," another elder said, "but we can honor what was wronged, so that the heart may heal." Still, the protagonist's pride held firm. The offered compensation, though generous, was not the reward sought. "I do not need gifts to claim my worth," the voice declared. "Dignity cannot be bought. Respect must be earned, truth must be spoken, and growth must be chosen over greed." In that choice, a deeper victory emerged, one of self-respect, moral clarity, and a promise that the cycle of silence and betrayal would no longer claim dominion over life. The voice of forgiveness rose softly, steady as the drumbeats that mark the passing of seasons. "I forgive," it said, "but I do not forget." Each word carried the weight of truth, the memory of betrayal, and the strength it took to stand without bitterness. Forgiveness was not surrender. It was armor forged in understanding, a quiet power that no wealth or pride could diminish. The story of what had been done would live, spoken in whispers and remembered in hearts, so that justice, though delayed, would not vanish. The community watched as the one who had suffered rose, not with anger, but with purpose. Every step carried the weight of survival, every glance a mirror for those who had silenced others. Here stood a living reminder that truth waits, that the voices once hidden still matter, and that delayed justice does not mean denied. Children, elders, and neighbors saw in this figure the courage to endure, the power of resilience, and the dignity of reclaiming one's place in the world. When blood had failed to protect, when family bonds had been stretched thin by secrecy, fate remained faithful. The wrongs done could not erase the path that destiny had marked. Truth, like water-carving stone, found its course, revealing what had been hidden. Justice moved, slow but inevitable, restoring balance where deception and silence had once reigned. In the end, the story did not close with riches or grand possessions. It ended in the reclamation of self, in the restoration of identity that had been lost behind whispers and walls of shame. Pride, courage, and integrity returned to the one who had suffered, standing taller than any inheritance or title. And so, the final lesson was left for every listening ear. Silence may hide the truth, but it cannot destroy it. Wealth cannot bury what is right. Families must guard justice as fiercely as they guard their name. And those who remember, forgive, and endure become the bearers of wisdom, carrying lessons that echo across generations, as enduring as the African sun over the land.